We are live. Let me know how I'm sounding. Check 1, check 2, check 3, check 4. We microphone check and then we check some more. Hope everybody's had a fantastic weekend. We are ready to talk some boxing, and you know there's a lot to cover. It's been a minute with these live chats. Lately, I've been doing mostly previews and a few reactions, and I've kind of been game planning an approach going forward to do different types of content that I've been, talking about for a while now, but something that I could fit in the week also, aside from a live chat, but to have something that's a little bit more episodic with segments and hopefully some guests as well. So yeah, let's rock and roll. Like, there's a lot to cover. There's obviously this past weekend, but there's also a lot of news, boxing news, and there are some recent fights that were made that I'm pretty excited about. So yeah, I want to jump into all that. We're going to cover obviously Shakur Stevenson's fight, his I would say relatively dominant win over Artem Harutyunyan. We're going to talk some William Zepeda, devastating Giovanni Cabrera, O'Shaquie Foster versus Robson Conceição, and whether that was a robbery or not. Spoiler, I kind of thought it was a robbery, but we're going to get into that fight and, also kind of navigating what might be next for O'Shaquie Foster. Like, he's not a name that rings to begin with. So his cachet was the fact that he held the belt and had a couple successful title defenses. I don't see it being easy for him to get right back in the championship mix, but we're going to talk a little bit about that fight and about its aftermath. We're gonna talk a little bit about the Ryan Garcia drama as well. This was obviously one of the more turbulent weeks, but I also want to talk a little bit about the suspension itself, not the one that was just handed down by the WBC after his racist rant, but I'm just talking about the actual New York State Athletic Commission, their 1-year suspension, and I'll give you my take on that. I have long been saying that I thought that the minimum should have been 18 months. I'll get into why. 18 to 24 months, like 2 years is where I would have ballparked it. But 18 months, if we have to be lenient or at least not career crushing, 18 months. Otherwise, I really think that it incentivizes boxers to cheat, especially superstar boxers. And I'll get into some of the financial reasons why I think that this particular 12-month suspension that was handed down actually encourages this type of cheating. We're going to get into Canelo Alvarez and who his next potential opponent might be. Will it be Edgar Berlanga? Will it be Chris Eubank Jr.? I think that the Chris Eubank Jr. one only makes sense if they hold it in the UK. Like, if they're planning to do this one in Vegas or in Texas or elsewhere, the Chris Eubank Jr. matchup makes almost no sense. And plus, he hasn't even been competing at 168 since he beat James DeGale, basically, like a few years ago. He's been a 160 guy for some time. So we're going to talk a little bit about what, I feel like we're back into Canelo season in terms of who's his next opponent. Of course, I'm holding out a little bit of hope that it's David Benavidez because, the WBC, for as much as they kind of sat on their hands and let Canelo do his thing, not enforcing the 168-pound mandatory, that guy being David Benavidez. So the WBC, on one hand, wasn't enforcing that, but now they're forcing David Benavidez to make the decision on whether he wants to keep his mandatory status at 168 or at 175. So it's almost like the WBC is making they're forcing David Benavidez's hand because of a situation they created by not enforcing their 168-pound mandatory status for Canelo. It's really a bit of a mess, and the WBC's got a lot of nerve in this case to force Benavidez's hand without enforcing or forcing Canelo's hand. That just shows you the boxing politics, where if you are of a certain stature and you have a certain amount of earning potential, fight over fight, you more or less get to make the calls. And that's what the WBC is making abundantly clear with this Canelo 168, David Benavidez 168, 175 situation. And then we're going to talk a little bit about the upcoming fights this weekend. Boots Ennis versus David Avanesian. It was supposed to be Cody Crowley. He pulled out. Enter David Avanesian. So that's what we got. And then we have Janibek versus Mihailovic. And look, Janibek, I just feel they need to get him an opponent that matters. We've gone a couple years now with Janibek, earning one belt. He's even unified 2 of the titles at 160. But this might be the weakest I've seen the middleweight division in several years. Not because there's not necessarily a lack of talent. It's just that in certain divisions, what promoter you are with matters an extra amount. And I feel like right now at middleweight, with Janibek holding 2 of the belts, Carlos Adames holding 1 of the belts, he just defended it recently a few weeks ago in a very close fight, actually. But the other title is held by Erislandy Lara. So you've got a situation where you don't have any great names at 160. You've got Janibek, the boogeyman, and other middleweights who don't appear eager to fight him. Now, the wild card, I feel, in this division is Hamza Shiraz, who we just saw beat Ammo Williams a few weeks ago when they had the Queensberry versus Matchroom. I'm hoping that Hamza Shiraz gets a title shot against one of these guys. I don't think it's going to be Erislandy Lara because of the way the PBC has been very sparse in placing their events with this new Amazon deal. We've only had like 3 events, at this point. I hope that Hamza Shiraz, if it's not against Lara, I hope that maybe it's against, Janibek Alamhanala or Carlos Adames, who's also a PBC guy. So I'm not holding my breath there either. Needless to say, the situation at middleweight is one of the weakest I've seen in this division since I can remember. And you know what? If Janibek doesn't get himself in position to start fighting some opponents that matter, he might have the same situation, that the same things that are lacking in Triple G's resume might end up lacking in Janibek's, where Triple G went several years crushing the, who was he beating? Parabin. He was beating, or Marco Antonio Rubio, Daniel Gill, fighters like that, right? He was Willie Monroe. Then he got into some fights that matter and finally got a Canelo showdown. But because when Triple G was in his physical prime, wasn't fighting enough of the opponents that mattered, I'm looking at Janibek, who's, turned the 30 corner, I believe, who hasn't fought any of those opponents that matter. And it's sad because it just so happens he's on a promoter who doesn't have a deep roster in the division that he operates in. It makes me think that maybe Janibek should go up to 168. Either get out of top rank or go to 168 because the status quo is not working for him. So, we're going to get into a little bit of that. And as I mentioned, also this weekend, Jaron Boots Ennis is fighting the late replacement, David Avanesian. There's some sleeper fights this coming weekend as well. Murataya is about to fight Tevin Farmer. Remember Tevin Farmer had the 130 belt. During the COVID pandemic, they had Tevin Farmer fighting like several times a year, it seemed, just defending that 130 title. He finally fought Jojo Diaz, who took the belt from him and later lost it on the scale before his fight with Shavkat Rakhimov. But Tevin Farmer was a belt holder for a long time. He was kind of a late bloomer. And then when he lost to Jojo Diaz, he disappeared for like 3+ years. He has since come back, had a few fights against lesser opponents, and now he's going to be fighting one of the, I would say, a top 10-ish lightweight in Murataya. Lee Van is in the house. Thank you for coming through. Heck yeah. Murataya versus Tevin Farmer, a little bit of a sleeper fight. That's going to be on the Janibek undercard. I'm actually more interested in Murataya versus Tevin Farmer than I am Janibek versus Mihailovic. Sam Goodman, who you might have heard is one of the names that people have been trotting out, possibly, being in an eventual fight with Naoya Inoue, the monster. Well, Sam Goodman's about to fight a lesser name. I think that's in 2 days. So I think that's going to be, I think that fight's taking place on Wednesday. Sam Goodman against Chenoy Warawut. I'm not even familiar with his opponent, but that's who Sam Goodman, one of the better fighters at 122, is going to be fighting against. Yeah, Lee Van, we're going to get into that robbery, the O'Shaquie Foster fight. I've heard some boxing voices that I respect saying that this wasn't a robbery. So Bob Arum of Top Rank came out, one of the most famous promoters of the past 50 years, right? Him and Don King are pretty much the two biggest promoters of the past 50 years. But Bob Arum was saying that it was not a robbery. Even though O'Shaquie Foster is on his promotion, he was saying that ESPN and basically the broadcast was calling it in a way that was too pro O'Shaquie Foster. And it's interesting. You hear this sometimes. You hear the commentary start to just shower praise on the A-side guy and acknowledging almost next to nothing on what the B-side guy is doing. So I'm almost having to I'm having to rethink, did I fall into the commentary trap with O'Shaquie Foster versus Robson Conceição? You know what? Let's get right into this one. This is a good place to start because Foster, I thought that this was going to be a more difficult fight. I thought this was nearly a 50-50 fight. I saw Conceição as being arguably better than O'Shaquie Foster's last two title defenses against Abraham Nova in his very latest fight, and then before that against Rocky Hernandez, who basically was winning on all the judges' scorecards heading into the 12th round. O'Shaquie Foster had to pull out a knockout in that 12th round to save his title. So because of the difficulty that Foster had against Rocky Hernandez, and then a very close fight, I thought, against Abraham Nova, who can't catch a break. He had a very close decision loss in his very last fight a couple weeks ago too. But I thought that O'Shaquie Foster might be due for an easier fight. And I didn't think he was going to get that with Robson Conceição. I thought, again, this might have been a 50-50 fight. But as I'm watching the fight, I'm surprised by how easily O'Shaquie Foster is able to maintain range and distance and just sweet science him to death. It wasn't pleasing to the eye. It wasn't a fun fight to watch by any stretch. But I'm like, damn, O'Shaquie Foster might be better than I thought, or Robson Conceição in his mid-30s might noticeably be slowing down. Because, look, I thought Robson Conceição was more competitive and closer to beating Oscar Valdez and Emmanuel Navarrete. I thought Conceição performed better against both of those guys than he did against O'Shaquie Foster. But then you see them get to the scorecards. And to be frank, I thought O'Shaquie Foster had an easier time with Conceição than he did in his two title defenses. In his last three fights, if you want to consider the fight where he won the title against Ray Vargas, I thought O'Shaquie Foster had a tougher time. Well, maybe not so much with Vargas, but certainly with Rocky Hernandez and with Abraham Nova. So when they got to the scorecard and they read the first score and they said, for Conceição, I saw O'Shaquie Foster's face and I'm like, oh boy, okay. But I was almost certain that the next two scorecards were going to correct that, and that this judge was going to look like that wacky scorecard, which we often get. But then I heard the other scorecard was close, and I'm like, wait a second, it was for Foster. And then heading into the third scorecard, I heard 115, 113. I'm like, whoa, wait a second. And I saw O'Shaquie Foster's face. He's like, and then they read out and knew. And look, again, maybe I got caught up in the commentary, in the pro A-side fighter, pro O'Shaquie Foster commentary, but I felt genuinely bad for O'Shaquie Foster because, look, in the UFC, they kind of implemented this rule where if you start to grapple somebody, you're not punching them, but you're grappling them, maintaining kind of superior position, that they stop crediting that. They stop factoring that into the score. So if you have somebody who, these are 5-minute rounds in the UFC, if there's somebody who's got wrestling control time for like 3.5 minutes out of 5 minutes, but then they get touched up a little bit, like hit with 3 significant punches, they're going to give that guy who punched him 3 times, they're going to give him that round because they are discrediting control time in the grapple, right? If you're not doing any like significant ground and pound or going for like a choke, right? Or an ankle lock or something. So I'm almost like, I fear that the tendency is becoming to discredit jabs and ring generalship and, you know, controlling range and all those things that a lot of like casual boxing fans might get bored with. Reasonably so. I'm not arguing with them. But like, I feel like judging might start to discredit that kind of boring wind. You know, if it's a slow round, then the guy who lands the jabs appears to be in control, jabs to the body, maintains range. I feel like if this trend holds, or if it even becomes an actual trend, then more and more judges might just start rewarding aggression. And we've seen a couple cases of that. Teofimo Lopez versus Jermaine Ortiz. I thought that it was kind of a draw-ish fight. I did think Teo did better in the second half of the fight than in the first half. I thought that a head clash that cut Jermaine Ortiz changed the fight, plus some fatigue. But Foster, I thought, clearly won the fight. Not only did he land at like a much higher percentage, like 30-something% to like in the teens or even a little bit below, but he landed more jabs, more power punches, more body shots. He cleaned up in the CompuBox, which again, Bob Arum started to criticize. He criticized the broadcast and he criticized CompuBox, saying, basically, what the hell do they know? They weren't even at the fight. But that kind of brings me to the idea, maybe judges don't need to be sitting ringside because they are obscured from the other angles. And we hear about this all the time. If you're sitting in one spot, you don't see the same thing that the judge across the ring, a judge sitting on this side or that side, is seeing. You know, and I've been to enough fights where I know that I can't judge this fight. I don't know what the hell's going on in the same way that I feel like I do when I'm watching the fight on TV. I feel like when I'm watching the fight on TV, I've got much better aptitude and idea of what's taking place. So here's my, I think that judges maybe should be watching what I'm watching minus the commentary. If you could give them a televised feed, hell, let them come to the fight, but have them plugged in so they could hear the punches from the televised feed. Again, minus the bias, potentially biased commentary. Maybe we give judges that. Because otherwise, I feel like, I've seen this is one of the worst scoring outcomes of the year so far for me. The worst scorecard is the guy who had Estrada beating Bam Rodriguez at the time of the knockout. Like, to me, that's unforgivable. If there was an unpardonable boxing sin, that should be that. And he shouldn't be judging any major fights. Make him work his way out. Like, he should be on at least probation where you're getting lesser fights. But even in those lesser fights, you're still affecting people's livelihoods. Losses matter. And there's just no way that you could have had Estrada up against Bam Rodriguez. That's the worst scorecard of the year, point blank. But this one, outcome-wise, I thought in the moment that it was horrific, but I'm going to actually err on the side of caution before I flat out declare it a robbery. I felt like it was a robbery. But I feel like I want to rewatch this one without the commentary to really glean what was going on in that ring. Because I was almost certain. I was so certain that O'Shaquie Foster was in control, I stopped paying full attention. I started kind of like half watching. My eyes were still on it, but I was kind of between texting and just not totally locked in because the story of the fight was playing out. And every time I would start intently focusing again, it was more of the same. It was O'Shaquie Foster jabbing him, controlling range, and then every now and then Hobson's able to get on the inside, throw a couple of punch. Like once Hobson's on the inside, he could throw a couple of effective shots, but it was so few and far between. And then you would get more of the slow round activity where O'Shaquie Foster is clearly in control. Let me get into what Jacob Clemente in the house. Thank you for coming through. H Money, Mob. Yeah, thank you for coming through. MOB. You say Conceição beat Navarrete. You know, when I was watching the fight, I actually thought that it was kind of a draw-ish fight, but I felt like Navarrete was still kind of edging it. But that was truly a coin flip. Are you saying 116, 112 about Conceição versus Navarrete or Foster versus Conceição? I don't know if Conceição beat Navarrete 116, 112. I thought that it felt like a 115, 113-ish fight. I mean, they set a record for how many, punches were landed across 12 rounds in a championship fight. Was that the deal? It was some record that was broken in that one. Oh, H Money says, salute to the channel. Salute to you. Thank you. Lee Van said, I watched without commentary and I thought that it was a shutout for O'Shaquie Foster. See, you saw it without the commentary and you had Foster by a landslide. I just can't think of how somebody could give that to Conceição. And you know what? Again, I don't know if it's going to be easy for Foster to get back into title contention because he's not a name that people get excited about. He had to kind of build his reputation up the hard way, beating Ray Vargas, defending that WBC title twice successfully. I don't know if other fighters are going to be lining up to get in the ring with Foster because he's a difficult guy to beat. But it's kind of messed up because this was a boring style of fight. But again, I felt like O'Shaquie Foster kind of deserved that, earned that. You know what I mean? Like he had such difficult fights in the last two that I thought he was due again for a uneventful type of fight. Lee Van said, I sat ringside before it. It's not ideal. It's better to be elevated to see the whole ring and to get a better sense of who's controlling the fight. I agree. I haven't sat ringside, but I've been like just a few rows back for like, I think, what was it? Prograis versus Jose Zepeda. And I saw the big action moments, but I didn't feel like I was getting a clear understanding of the moment by moment action. Like I thought that the fight was like near even through several rounds. But then when I rewatched it with commentary and on TV, it looked clear that Prograis was winning the vast majority of the rounds. Another fight that I attended and really couldn't tell, at least through 6 to 7 rounds, who was in control was Jermell Charlo in the rematch against Brian Castano. I went to that one and I thought that maybe Charlo was edging most of the rounds, but it seemed super competitive up until the time Charlo knocked Castano down. It's tough to tell. It really is. Hey, Nothing is Originals in the house. Thank you for coming through. So yeah, that's how I feel about Foster versus Conceição. I thought Conceição was closer to beating Valdez and Navarrete than he was to beating Foster. And I thought Foster had a tougher time with Abraham Nova and with Rocky Hernandez than he did with Conceição. And I was surprised by that. I'm like, damn, Conceição is really not performing well. I thought this might be a retirement fight for Conceição. I'm like, okay, he's clearly lost something athletically. Some of what he had against Valdez, what he had against, maybe not Shakur Stevenson, bad example, but maybe against Navarrete. I was thinking maybe that Navarrete was kind of like his last stand, and now he's going to lose a 9 rounds to 3 type of fight to Foster, but he was awarded the win. So there you go. Let's see. So let's talk a little bit about Shakur Stevenson dominating, or I would say close to dominating. I gave Harutunian maybe the first one of 2 rounds, something like that. But it was more or less all Stevenson beyond that point. I feel like people are placing such a pressure on Shakur Stevenson to start looking fun and start knocking people out that it's almost, I feel, look, he's on Twitter a lot, but I feel a little bit bad for the reputation that he's developing. Not that he's not earning the reputation of being a somewhat boring fighter, because we've seen it now a few times. We've seen it against Nakatila. We've seen it against maybe Toka Clary. He beat the hell out of Caraballo before stopping him. And so there have been a couple of Shakur Stevenson fights where you want to see more. You want to see more of a hurt. And obviously the fight against Edwin De Los Santos, but I actually feel like De Los Santos is a very dangerous fighter. You know, Nakatila has a dangerous right hand, but I mean, we saw what Murataya was able to do with Nakatila, but Shakur Stevenson doesn't have tremendous punching power. I think that much is clear, right? But he was adamant about knocking him out. He was saying, going back to his corner, I'm going to get a knockout. I'm going to knock this guy out. And to be quite, I'll be transparent here. I actually bet on this fight. My bet was putting a little bit of money on Shakur Stevenson securing the stoppage, getting the knockout, not by any particular round, not the under, just Stevenson by KO, TKO. And when he started beating up on Artem and working his body, and you started seeing Artem like backing up and Stevenson looking more emboldened, I'm like, yeah, it was going to be the result that I wanted. And then I saw him go back to his corner, say, I'm knocking him out. I'm like, okay. But then a couple rounds later, I started seeing that Artem was like fighting more of an ambush style. He was still kind of doing the twitch flinch, but he was moving laterally a lot. And then he would jump in and throw a few punches and then get back on his bike a little bit. And then I saw Shakur having difficulty landing the same types of shots that he was landing in the first, in like rounds 3 through 6, in rounds 7 through like 9, 10. I'm like, damn, this looks like it's going to be a decision. And then I see Shakur go back to his corner and basically complain. He's moving to his left. And then when I start trapping him over there, then he moves to his right. It's like, well, yeah, that's how someone's going to try to survive if they feel like they're in trouble. But then you hear I think it was his grandfather saying to him in the corner, use your jab more. Use your jab more. And I feel like he should have taken that advice. Like, when you look at fighters who are walking people down and who are cornering them and who are beating guys who are on the run, and not to say Artem was totally on the run. Artem was engaging. He was still trying to let his hands go, obviously. But there were so many opportunities, I thought, for Shakur Stevenson to trap, to let his hands go, and to jab to control range, and then get closer inside, let some more punches, especially to the body, go. But he wasn't. It looked like he started like hunting him for like big shots and just looking for those big blows to inflict maximum damage rather than to keep on breaking Haratunian down. So, after this fight, this wasn't the performance that Shakur Stevenson wanted going into his contract negotiations. He wanted to show out and be impressive and to be on everybody's, in everybody's mind, on everybody's lips. He wanted everybody talking about, damn, don't you want to see Shakur Stevenson versus Tank Davis? And many still do. I do. But people aren't excited and fired up about Shakur Stevenson in this moment. And there are certain Shakur fights where they are excited. Jamel Herring, that was a great performance. Yoshino, his 135 debut, people were super excited. Like, I thought that Shakur Stevenson was going to have greater punching power at lightweight based on that performance against Yoshino. But then we got the last 2 fights against De Los Santos and most recently against Haratunian, where I'm like, damn, maybe it's just not meant to be. Maybe he's just not that guy to get you out of there in most of his fights. And the thing is, for fighters that are coming up in the ranks and they are in their lower divisions before they start growing into their bigger divisions, Floyd Mayweather, Shane Mosley, and Shane Mosley got a lot of late career knockouts too. But different fighters, they score a bunch of knockouts early, then they start cruising to decisions as they age. I feel like Shakur's too young. Same with Devin Haney. Like, I mean, they are fighting elite fighters. Let's be clear. They are fighting like cream of the crop. A lot of them, like Oscar Valdez. Shakur Stevenson beat him. I didn't expect him to stop Oscar Valdez, and he didn't, right? But then there are those other guys in between where you think that if this guy is truly a cut from that cloth, an A+ level fighter, you should be stopping that guy, right? And again, I'm not holding them to unrealistic standards. Like, you know, Terrence Crawford wasn't getting a ton of stoppages at 135. He started stopping more guys at 140, and then he's been stopping all of his 147-pound opponents. I'm interested to see how he does against Madrimov. Not too sure. But Shakur Stevenson is already a decision fighter, and he's still like, what, 27 years old? He's in his third division, to be fair. He's a three division belt holder, but you would like to see him pour on the offense a little bit more. And this was an unfortunate, even though, again, he cruised to a victory, it was unfortunate that it couldn't be more of a sensational performance going into a pivotal situation where his next couple of years is probably going to be determined by his next move. And so first, before we talk about what Shakur Stevenson's next move is, I want to get to some of what you're saying, which I really do wonder what Shakur is going to do. Is it going to be a 2-3 fight deal? Is it going to be a long-term, deal with Eddie Hearn and Matchroom? Is he going to come back to Top Rank, which is looking like more and more of a good idea based on the landscape at 135, unless he wants to go to 140, right? But we're going to talk a little bit about that. Let's see. Nothing is original said. It's true. Watching in person, watching it. Two different viewpoints. And then you said Shakur's doing it to himself. He acts like he's God's gift to boxing, but then blames others for not loving him, putting on subpar fights. That's fair. He is in the camp with Andre Ward, Terrence Crawford, and Keyshawn Davis, who is starting to develop some of the same issues. Keyshawn Davis should definitely be knocking out more of his opponents, in my opinion. You know what I mean? But, and he knocks some of them out. But Shakur Stevenson has had this glow, right? People have been talking about him like he's the future for like 4 years now, 3 to 4 years at least. And he's still a very, very, very good fighter. He is. He's an excellent boxer. And I'm not ruling out him beating some of the top 3 guys at 135. I think that he's got a good shot at beating at least Lomachenko now. I'm not so sure about Tank Davis. I know a lot of people think that, that Devin Haney and Shakur and these different guys will have a good shot at beating Tank. I just feel like the margin for error is so slim against a guy like Tank. Like when I think about Tank Davis fights that I envision, I'm starting to put Tank Davis in there and wondering how he would do against some of the greatest of the past 20 to 30 years. Like I wonder how, Manny Pacquiao at lightweight does against Tank Davis. I know Manny Pacquiao had only one lightweight fight against David Diaz, but I wonder how Tank Davis would do. I'm like, okay, Tank Davis would be catching a lot of punches from Manny Pacquiao, but Marquez gave Manny Pacquiao fits throughout their whole rivalry, not only in that 4th fight, but the 2nd fight was close. The 1st fight had Pacquiao dropping Marquez 3 times in the 1st round, and then Marquez earning a draw because he won so many rounds after that. And then their 3rd fight, I thought Marquez won, but they gave it to Manny Pacquiao. So Marquez, being an angle-based counterpuncher, gave Pacquiao fits. I'm wondering, could Davis be the type who sets those traps and is explosive enough to really put a hurting on Pacquiao? But I also don't know how Tank Davis would handle getting punched repeatedly by Pacquiao, because Pacquiao's got knockout power and he's got that blazing hand speed and the volume. You know what I mean? So, but what I'm saying is those are the types of fights that I start to like. Those fantasy fights, I'm picturing Tank Davis in some of those now. But I can't say I would favor Shakur Stevenson against Tank Davis. How could I? He would have to box pretty perfectly or nearly perfectly for 12 rounds when Tank Davis only has to be right a couple of times. You know what I mean? So Shakur, I do see as being elite, and look, he could win multiple titles at this weight class. I think he beats Dennis Berinchyk. I think he might beat Vasily Lomachenko. But is he going to be a crossover pay-per-view superstar? I look at, Floyd Mayweather as being the exception. Usually those types of superstars who have that crossover appeal are like Oscar De La Hoya, who scored a lot of knockouts throughout his career. I don't know what you think of De La Hoya, but he was a hard puncher, period. But him, Mike Tyson, who's another crossover pay-per-view superstar, Manny Pacquiao, they're not very many. Sugar Ray Leonard was a sensation. So you've got, a few, but Floyd is the only one that I could think of who developed into being a point fighter when he stopped scoring a bunch of knockouts. Who were his last couple knockouts against? Ricky Hatton, Victor Ortiz in that kind of weird knockout. And then Conor McGregor, right? Everybody else, I think, took him to the decision. Cotto, Canelo, the Ghost, Guerrero, and mostly Maidana twice, Berto. But Floyd was still a pay-per-view superstar. That's rare. Usually you would have to have like Tank Davis-like power or just be an all-out, just one of the most incredible fighters to watch ever, like Manny Pacquiao, to be a crossover sensation. So I don't know what the crossover pay-per-view viability will be for Shakur Stevenson. Will he grow into a pay-per-view star before somebody beats him? You know what I mean? So yeah, we'll see. But again, I think that he beats most guys. I would like to see him against even Murataya. I want to see him against a lot of these 135 guys. I want to see him. I actually kind of want to see him run it back against Edwin De Los Santos just so he could clean that one up. I know he said that it was a hand injury, but I was wondering how he would do against De Los Santos because I wanted to see how he would operate against somebody who has nearly the same hand speed, if not just as much, if not a little bit more hand speed than him. And to me, he barely passed that test, if at all. QT is in the house. Thank you for coming through. Nothing is original. Say he has so much talent, but needs to take some responsibility for his fight effort when he views himself as pay-per-view worthy. Yeah, that's fair. And you know what? He didn't have look, again, he's been champion in 3 different divisions, but Devin Haney was able to play his cards in a way where he started getting the big opportunities, taking the gambles that were worth it. Like the same way Devin Haney went over to Australia, fought Kambosos twice for all the belts. I mean, that is about as good an opportunity as you could get to get all the belts, and you got to fight that guy, George Kambosos, for the belts. But at the time, a lot of us were wondering, I don't know how this fight's going to play out. This is before we saw Kambosos versus Maxie Hughes. This is before we saw Haney dominate Kambosos over 2 fights. We thought we were fresh off of seeing Kambosos beat up on Teofimo Lopez in a close decision win. So it was a big question mark. Are the judges going to give it to Haney if he wins a 8 rounds to 4 type of fight? You know what I mean? But Haney did what he had to do, played his cards right, and got tremendous opportunities, and then circled back and got the Lomachenko fight, and then Ryan Garcia made a ton of money. But what are the cards that Shakur can play if these opponents don't want to fight him? I'm thinking that he should have called Haney's bluff, maybe taken less money and got in the ring with Devin Haney and let the chips fall where they will. I thought that maybe he should go ahead and take that, short end of the stick, but he thought that it didn't make business sense. So, and he finds himself where he is right now. So we'll see what his next move is, but the circumstances aren't ideal because of the reputation that he's starting to build. And not the sweet science, great reputation, but the boring fighter. You don't want to be slapped with that tag. Let's see. DJ, thank you for coming through. You said, I believe Shakur is at peace and that he might not be the most exciting fighter. He mentioned at the post press conference that he wouldn't mind making millions of dollars fighting no names. Some people, and maybe that's the case. Maybe that's the case. I mean, we've seen fighters make a lot of money without fighting guys that Gary Russell Jr. made a whole career. I mean, he had a couple fights against meaningful opponents, Johnny Gonzalez and Vasily Lomachenko. Jojo Diaz wasn't as big a name as he became later, but he was undefeated at the time Gary Russell fought him. But we saw him just make his mandatory title defense and let that be that. Jamal Charlo, we've seen him fight most of his career fighting names that don't matter and making millions fighting them. So we'll see if, Shakur actually wants to chart that type of a path. He strikes me as somebody who cares about his reputation. Otherwise, why would you be on Twitter, X, so much? Let's see. QT said, Shakur looked good. Artem is a good fighter. Yeah, maybe Artem needs to start getting some credit here, right? He fought, Frank Martin, where Steve Farhood's unofficial scorecard through 9 rounds had Artem beating Frank Martin going into the 10th round. Maybe we should start giving Artem some credit. I would like to see Artem fighting other guys that are in the top 15-ish mix. I want to see Roman Villa, the guy who beat Rashidi Ellis, then got stopped by Boots Ennis. I want to see him fight other fighters that matter. I want to see a lot of these guys who give people a run for their money, give good fighters a run for their money, fight other good fighters. Let's see. But yeah, QT said, continued, Shakur has time to figure out how to finish unique to his skill set. Yeah, how to finish guys with the tools that he has. I agree. Him walking Artem down. Yeah. Artem is kind of an episodic guy. He'll jump in, throw a few punches. He does a lot of like feinting and flinching, which is effective. You don't know when he's going to throw a punch. You don't know where he's going to throw a punch. Artem is pretty tricky, But again, I think that the jab would have helped. Nothing is original said. What ESPN didn't show fans before leaving the fight was over in his hometown. Wait, the fight was over in his hometown to devalue him was nasty work by Top Rank. Oh, when they cut to the fans leaving that wasn't cool. Yeah, they did that. Now, was that a sabotage effort by ESPN by Top Rank saying don't let the door hit you on your way out? I kind of felt like, like sometimes they would say certain promoters, I forgot which fights, but a promoter would rob a fighter before the fighter leaves the promotion. Was them cutting to fans leaving their way, Top Rank's way of giving the finger to Shakur Stevenson? It's possible. But it wasn't the most pleasing fight to watch. It really wasn't. But, us hardcore boxing fans, we understand that not every fight is going to be, just one of those fight of the year style fights. Let's see. QT said, I think Prime Marquez would beat Tank. I was thinking about that earlier today. I actually sent that, particular matchup up. I sent it out to like my cousin and my dad and my brother asking who would win between Tank and Marquez. It would be interesting. And, but Tank can hunt people and he can take a step back and counter. Obviously that probably wasn't Prime Marquez who fought Timothy Bradley. Bradley really outboxed Marquez in that one. But let's see. Prime Marquez, yeah, he wasn't fighting up at 147, 140. He was at 130-ish. So, that would be interesting because here's the thing. Marquez, I remember him dropping early rounds to Katsitas. Remember Katsitas? And against Baby Bull, Juan Diaz. And he stopped Juan Diaz. That was one of his best fights. I thought that was one of Marquez's best showings. But Marquez can get backed up and he can get beaten up on. He starts figuring things out and then he starts setting his traps. I think the hand speed would be a problem, but Tank doesn't throw as much volume as a Manny Pacquiao, so it doesn't give you as many opportunities. I don't know. That's an interesting one. DJ said, I think the problem with Shakur wanting to be a pay-per-view star is that his style of boxing doesn't excite the casual sports fan. At the end of the day, you have to be entertaining to watch. Yeah, you do. And again, Floyd Mayweather is the exception, but he also became such a good promoter, right? Like those 24/7s with HBO and then the All Access with Showtimes. If you were watching those, you were totally like dialed in and you were just genuinely growing in excitement for Floyd versus Ricky Hatton, right? Floyd versus Miguel Cotto and so forth. Sup, Swoles? Yes. What's up, fam? Hatton was definitely the last time he put someone down in devastating fashion. Yeah, you're right. Because the other, does the Victor Ortiz knockout really count? QT said Floyd Mayweather had enough pop to be assertive. Yeah, he started walking people down and he started standing his ground. Not to say Shakur's not standing his ground. Shakur isn't like backing up, but Floyd would, like when he got hurt badly by Shane Mosley in that second round, he started walking Mosley down, backing Mosley up, right? He started making a point where it's almost like he's got a winky right like force field, and then he's just moving forward. And every time he gets in range, pop, he hits he hits Mosley with a right hand or a hard jab or a hook. To the point where you started seeing Mosley like wanting to tap gloves and backing up and basically trying to he was waving the white flag in a way without quitting, right? Mosley's a tough guy to stop. Let's see. Go Swing is in the house. Yeah, I thought, okay, I would say Shakur somewhat dominated after the third round. I thought that Artem Haratunian won maybe the first or second round, and then Shakur was demonstrably winning the rounds in non-exciting fashion. Nothing is Original said, I'm surprised Crawford doesn't explain to him winning isn't enough, but how you win matters more than just being undefeated. Means very little to a paying hardcore or viewing casual. So remember, like, Terrence Crawford wasn't knocking a lot. Like, he didn't knock out, I don't think he knocked out Ricky Burns. I don't think he knocked out Breedis Prescott. I remember watching a lot of Crawford fights at 135 in particular, where he wasn't a knockout guy. Again, that started to change at 140 and then obviously at 147. But, Crawford was kind of like a hardcore fan, and still is to this day. He's not like a crossover celebrity, even today. But he was like the fight fans fighter. He was a fighter's fighter, right? And he grew a reputation before he grew famous. He was starting to land in a lot of people's top threes, top fives, pound for pound, before non-hardcore boxing fans really even knew who he was. Even though he was fighting on ESPN, a platform that people have access to. Let's see. Lee Van said, what are the odds that we will ever see Crawford versus Ennis? I don't think we will see Crawford versus Boots. I would actually be surprised. It's really going to matter, I think, on what Crawford looks like at, 37 years old against Madrimov in this upcoming fight on August 3rd, which I'm going to try to get tickets to. But I don't think that Crawford's going to fight Ennis. I think that he's really going to try to continue to angle for a Canelo fight, or maybe Tim Tszyu, or I don't know. We'll see where the chips fall at 154. I feel so bad for Tim Tszyu after receiving that cut and everything that's happened since. But I think that it's more likely that Crawford collects belts at 154. I think for Boots to fight Crawford, Boots will have to come to 154 and knock off a champ or two. Then he might get a Terrence Crawford fight. So I would say that the odds are pretty low that happens while Crawford's still fighting. Like, look, I think that the writing is on the wall for Crawford. Like, 37, I don't care who you are. Floyd Mayweather was winding down his career. Well, when he was 36, he beat Canelo, in fairness, but he was really winding it down by the end of 37, 38. So I don't think Crawford necessarily has more than 3 fights left, actually, because even if you take good care of yourself in those lower divisions, like, look, check it out. Look at where, like, Tito Trinidad was. Oscar De La Hoya, I know that he wasn't the model citizen when it came to taking care of yourself into your 30s. But Sugar Ray Leonard, Tommy Hearns, look at all the different 147 guys. Granted, a lot of these guys went way up in weight by that time. But when fighters who are around welterweight weight get into their mid 30s, let alone 36, 37, look at where they were in their career, if not totally retired by then. Shane Mosley, look at where he was. All these guys. I don't care how good you are, how well you take care of yourself. If you're fighting at an elite level, now you're fighting bigger guys. I wouldn't be surprised if Crawford is either in a 50-50 style fight in his next... Look, it wouldn't be surprising to me if he has difficulty with Madrimov. I would still, I think, favor him. I'm going to do a preview on that fight, but I still think that he pulls it off. I don't necessarily think that he stops Madrimov, but I think that he's going to run into some trouble in his second or third fight at 154. I just don't think that you could still fight at an A+ level at 38, 39 years old at welterweight 154. I just don't think you really can. Let's see. Venture is in the house. Yes, thank you for coming through. What's up? Let's see. Nothing is original says Shakur wants to be Money May, but is skipping a pretty boy level first. Yeah, Money May paid his dues, knocking off champions, former champions, having that, stoppage over Diego Corrales, having a lot of just difficult fights, and just fights against different fighters, different styles. On the way up, several. Floyd went several years without being a household name. I remember how frustrating I felt frustrated for him. Like, you might remember, like, after his fights, he would be in those post-fight in-ring interviews with Larry Merchant. So would Roy Jones, by the way. And Larry Merchant's like, what would you say to the fighter, or to the fans and the critics who say that you're not, exciting, that you're not hitting hard enough, that you're not captivating the audience and all this stuff? Floyd had to hear that for years. That's why it was bubbling up so much by the time he said, you don't know shit about boxing, when they had that whole moment after the Victor Ortiz fight. It's because Floyd, throughout his 20s, had to hear Larry Merchant's criticism after Floyd wins in that post-fight in-ring interview. So, yeah, Shakur Stevenson is going through much of the same. Again, he's won belts in 3 different divisions. So it's not like he's not an accomplished fighter. And he beat Oscar Valdez. I think that was a very significant win. He was the first to beat Valdez. So I'm going to talk a little bit about William Zepeda and him devastating Giovanni Cabrera. I mean, damn. Look, Giovanni Cabrera just went 12 rounds with Isaac Cruz and had 1 fight in between beating that guy. But Cabrera's a pretty good fighter. And, that was an exciting first round. We saw Cabrera come out and he was throwing, he landed some like nice hooks on William Zepeda, like clocked him super cleanly. Like 4 or 5 times? It seemed like every time he would throw something, he would just boom. Like you just hear that thud, and William Zepeda just got hit. But I can't think of the last time I've seen somebody with the relentless pressure of Zepeda. It's just, I like to call it a treadmill from hell, where the guy just puts you on this unsustainable pace and just makes it a nightmare for the opponent. We've seen a few guys who do something similar but different. Emmanuel Navarrete, David Benavidez. They're different guys who put their opponent on an incredible pace. But the way that Zepeda is doing it, it's almost like he's walking through punches and he doesn't care what you throw, because it's almost like his life depends on throwing another 15 power punches in the next 35 seconds. That's how he's approaching these fights. And Giovanni Cabrera came in with a game plan. He came in, like, again, landing clean shots. He came in with a lot of heart and spirit, but he had his spirit broken by the second round. What did he get? Stopped like in the 3rd or 4th round? By the end of the first round, I was like, whoo, Cabrera's in trouble. And again, Cabrera had a great first minute of that first round. I'm like, ooh, is this going to get interesting? But then when I saw the fight start to take a William Zepeda type of look, I'm like, oh no, he's gonna go out like they all do. And William Zepeda is stopping these guys now in the early rounds. Like Maxie Hughes didn't make it out of, he made it through 4 rounds. Giovanni Cabrera made it through 3 rounds, 4 rounds or something. Like, these guys aren't even making it half the fight against William Zepeda. I just don't know how you could possibly do what he's doing. I'm not going to raise any like I'm skeptical types of questions, about, William Zepeda. I'm just saying, I don't know if I've seen anything like it in recent years, where it's not only like the volume, because there are guys who throw a lot of punches, but it's the wicked intention on those punches. We see guys throw 100 punches around, but he's an outlier. Navarrete is too, where you're throwing 100 plus effective looking shots. And you know what? What I would love to see in the wake of this fight, and I think that boxing it lends itself to this fight. Shakur Stevenson and William Zepeda just fought on the same day. If Shakur Stevenson can convince Eddie Herner Matchroom to make a fight, or to try to make a fight with a cross-promotional fight, it's all on DAZN, with Golden Boy, to get William Zepeda in the ring with him, I feel like that's about as good as it gets if you're not fighting Tank Davis or Vasily Lomachenko. because it sounds like they're going to fight each other. And I hope that they make that fight. But if you're not able to get Tank and you're not able to get Lomachenko, that's about the next best you could do at 135. Now, yes, you could fight Denis Berichek, who's holding another one of those belts, but you'd have to do, business with Top Rank. Berichek beat Navarrete on Top Rank for that vacant WBC belt. So I don't think that you could leave Top Rank and then make a cross-promotional fight with Top Rank so you could take a title from one of their guys and then take it with you back over to Matchroom or wherever you go. But here's what I'll say about promoters right now, and Eddie Hearn in particular. I feel like he outwardly advocates for his fighters in a way that I'm not seeing other promoters. Besides, Oscar kind of does it too. Oscar does it. But Eddie Hearn is constantly out there throughout the week, just championing his guys, kind of like speaking about how he wants to kind of set things up to then make this fight and then work with this guy to make this fight. He's just out there advocating for his fighters. I feel like maybe, Boots Ennis just went to Eddie Hearn Matchroom. I feel like maybe that's the move for Shakur Stevenson, unless you can make nice with Top Rank, because let's keep it real. They've got Murataya, they've got Denis Berichek, they've got Lomachenko. They've got a lot of the cards, are holding a lot of the cards at lightweight. So if you could make nice with them and go back over there, not for 5 fights, maybe for 3, then do that. Otherwise, maybe Eddie Hearn is next best place. It's hard to advocate for somebody to go to PBC right now, just because we don't know how their situation is gonna shape up with Amazon Prime. Like, I've been hearing that depending on who you believe in terms of boxing voices who are out there, some people have been predicting their demise, PBC's demise, for some time. I'm not going to buy too much into that, but I will say I am curious to see how their fight calendar plays out throughout the second half of 2024. We've only gotten 3 fight cards through the first half of 2024. Let's see what the second half of 2024 looks like. But I couldn't say that I would advise Shakur Stevenson to sign with PBC right now, not before you have more answers as to what the hell is going on with their non-pay-per-view Amazon Prime fights. So otherwise, unless you're going to go with Golden Boy and to make William Zepeda versus Stevenson, maybe go over to Eddie Hearn and just try to get cross-promotional opportunities. But because of the way boxing politics works, it might be frustratingly difficult, like it was for, Devin Haney for some time. Like when he was with Matchroom, the best they could do for him was put him in there against Jorge Linares and against Jojo Diaz. That was the best they were able to offer. Or like Demetrius Andrade. We saw Eddie Hearn in interviews saying, why can't Demetrius Andrade versus Jamal Charlo happen? Why can't Demetrius Andrade versus Canelo or whoever happen? And it was a very frustrating experience, right? There's a possibility that if Shakur signs with Eddie Hearn, that it's going to look a little bit like that. So it's tough to tell. But that whole I'm going to self-manage and self-promote, that only works, really, if you're in Canelo's shoes and you wield that type of power, right? We saw Roy Jones do it back in the day. I would say that he was able to do it with mixed results. I don't think it was he could have had a much better career. For as great as his career was, he could have fought more fights that matter in his prime than what he was getting, than what he was able to make happen. You've got to play ball with some of these promoters, unfortunately. But yeah, it's going to be interesting to see how Shakur Stevenson navigates those waters. I know he's got Jay Prince, managing him. He's got some good, some great insiders with him, Andre Ward. But if these opponents don't want to fight you, there's only so much you could do. You know what? It almost seems like it makes more sense to try to make nice with Top Rank and get back over there for maybe a 3-fight deal and try to collect a belt against Denis Berichek, or try to work cross-promotionally to get a fight against William Zepeda, just because Zepeda's name is buzzing. But yeah, I get frustrated talking boxing politics. I'm going to get back to over what some of y'all are saying. Let's see. Boxing with Frank Bay. Thank you for coming through. You said, did you say Shakira Twitterson? Shakur Twitterson. I mean, that's what he had on his trunks. Twitterson, right? Is a selfish, delusional crybaby. He wants all the adoration and accolades without giving fans any memorable fights, like Bam Rodriguez just gave us. We're going to talk a little bit about Bam too. By the way, I said it earlier in the hour, worst scorecard of the year is whoever had Estrada beating Bam at the time of the knockout. But, you know, Shakur, I feel like when you start to hear people tell you that you're the best and you start hearing like what your reputation is and people saying, you know, you are the future of boxing, how can that not go to your head? You know what I mean? And maybe some of that has happened, but then you run into all the hate that you're hearing on or seeing on Twitter, X, about you. If you are tuned into that and you just heard everybody talk about how you're the future, I can see how you start kind of working up this mental whirlwind where, you know, you start engaging Twitter a little bit too much and you start having an unrealistic view of how you should be viewed. Maybe there is some of that going on. You know what? I'm gonna pivot here and talk a little bit about Ryan Garcia. Look, obviously the rant, it was reprehensible and all that. And look, I don't know if any promoters are gonna want to work with. Well, anytime you are a true cash cow, you will find somebody who will be willing to work with you. And because he's suspended for a year, he's got a lot of time to start trying to play damage control, get into rehab, try to clean it up and all that. We will see how that unfolds. But like his toxicity, it has reached an all-time high and his reputation is reaching an all-time low. You know, Golden Boy came out, said that they, you know, don't approve of anything that he's saying. His family said that they've been trying to get him help and try to get him admitted, try to get him into rehab and are concerned. And every other boxing voice is seeing the same thing. You know what I mean? And it's all who are the people around him? How can they not get him into a situation where he's getting the help that he needs? And it was kind of crazy because a lot of people were thinking, oh, maybe he's just playing dumb and maybe he's just playing crazy for the sake of this Devin Haney fight. I'm like, nah, this seems legit, like he's got a problem. And then we've seen him continue to spiral, because I think that the spiral started months before the Haney fight. He continues to spiral. And then the Haney fight just kind of patched it up for a moment. And then he was the talk of the town for all the right reasons for a few days, a few weeks. And then he tested positive for the PEDs and it's been all crazy and downhill from there, right? First of all, I know that the New York State Athletic Commission did something. They suspended him for a year. I feel like their suspension actually encourages cheating, at least for superstar fighters. And that's because if you look at what he made in that fight and how much his performance in that fight ups his future earnings, right? So he made a ton of money. He stands to make much more money. They fined him like $1 million out of several millions of dollars, right? They fined him $1 million. They suspend him for a year. Elite fighters don't fight but twice a year anyway. So you've basically missed one pay cycle, maybe two, but you could fight right after that year. So you could fight in 14 months. So you really just missed one pay cycle. Ryan Garcia taking the PEDs, right? He had PEDs in his system, tested positive, and he purposely, according to him, missed weight by 3 pounds. Then he puts on the performance that we all saw in that ring against Devin Haney. He bet multi-millions of dollars on himself to win the fight. He was a big underdog going into the fight. So he makes millions of dollars betting on himself. And again, they just fine him $1 million and take him out of one pay cycle. How is that not worth it? If you are able to make way more money than you're being suspended, and say there's I don't know what the percentage chance is that you get caught for taking the PEDs. Let's put it at like 20%. You got a 1/5 chance getting caught. Let's just say you have a 1/3 chance getting caught. You still made more than you're going to get fined. You still made a ton of money. And whenever you return to the ring, you stand to make way more money. in this rematch against Devin Haney, if it ever happens, he's going to make way more money in that fight than he made in the first fight. Canelo, when he came back and fought the rematch against Triple G after the clenbuterol positive test, right? They suspended him only for 6 months. He comes back, makes a boatload of money in the rematch against Triple G. How is it not incentivizing at least star fighters? I can't speak for the ones who are making 20,000. If you get suspended for a year and you're a guy who needs to fight, 4 or 5 times a year just to put food on your family's table, that's a different situation. You might get blackballed from the game and you might have a rough go going forward. But if you're already a name in the game and you're a high earner, it almost makes sense to cheat if they're only going to slap you on the wrist with a 6-month or 12-month suspension. I was thinking it should be minimum 18-month. That way you're guaranteed missing 2 pay cycles. And because boxing the prime of your career in this sport is so short, you got such a limited window of your highest earning potential. 18 months is significant. If you're out of the ring for like 2 years and you come back, first of all, there's no guarantee that you will ever be that same guy who we last saw. And then you come back 18 to 24 months later, you might never regain all the attributes and physical properties and athleticism that you had. Look, when Ali was banned, I think he was like 27 years old, came back to the ring at like 30 years old. So he missed like his late 20s. When he came back, yes, he went on to have some of his most iconic fights ever, but he was never the same athlete that he was when he got banned. He was never as fleet of foot as he was when he was Cassius Clay first becoming Muhammad Ali. If you look at the way that he fought, he wasn't like back against the ropes guy. He wasn't about that waving you in so I could preserve my legs because I don't want to move around the ring all fight. He wasn't that guy. No, he was float like a butterfly, sting like a bee. He was that guy. He was the blinding fast with the fastest feet, arguably in heavyweight division history, certainly one of them, but he never regained those attributes. So I don't think that 12 months is enough. I think that you need to send a message with at least 18 months. And then if the guy is able to salvage a good career beyond that, more power to you. But at least it de-incentivizes cheating, because anything less 6 to 12 months, the risk is worth the reward because of how much money you're making and because of how much it would matter if you have a performance of a lifetime in that ring, if you've got a chance at cheating and not getting caught. That's the thing. So yeah, I wasn't happy with the 12-month suspension, and everything that's happened since, that's more just a personal problem for Ryan Garcia. I know that he still has some fans. I know that he's got, a whole bunch of yes people around him that evidently, either don't care about him or he's so far gone that they, it's hard to change an adult's decisions. You can't tell an adult really what to do. You can't stop an adult from doing what they want to do. So I look, this could end very, very bad for Ryan Garcia on the path that he's currently on. So maybe the suspension, I don't know. It's tough to tell because sometimes being in the ring and having to prepare for a fight, it keeps you on a schedule and it kind of keeps you honest. It keeps your activities grounded. But he clearly seems to have like a really bad alcohol problem, and he's just making a whole bunch of bad decisions. Look, the way that he was saying all the racist stuff that he was saying, I don't think this is his first time saying it. Like, this wasn't his first rodeo, in my opinion. But you can at least get away with being a closet racist if you're not drinking and saying all the dumb stuff that's in your head. You know what I mean? And that's what he just can't control. He's got no filter and he's on social media all the time. So he went from being after that performance against Haney, the face of boxing, to becoming a disgrace to boxing, to now just being somebody who could go completely off the rails, and who knows like where this thing bottoms out. That's where we are with Ryan Garcia right now. Let me get into some of what you're saying. Let's see. Boxing with Frank Bay says Zepeda's the real deal. Cabrera's a decent fighter. Yeah, and he stopped him in 4 rounds. Zepeda just has the will to entertain and make statements, and he is making statements. He's finishing these guys quickly. It just seems overwhelming, like the amount of pressure and volume that he's putting on these guys. And the thing is, he's not just a brawler. He'll jab to get back in range just to throw 6 more punches. So even if you start to use your legs to sidestep and to pivot away, try to bring it back to the center of the ring, he'll throw that jab out there to occupy you, to blind you, to hit you, stepping in, closing range, and then throw 6 more punches. It's really, really tough. DJ said William Zepeda versus Oscar Duarte. That would be a fun one. Yeah, especially after Oscar Duarte's stoppage over Jojo Diaz. William Zepeda wasn't able to stop Jojo. Oscar Duarte was. Let's see. Ventru said Kenny Ellis line about Loma stepping aside. Yeah, I saw that. QT said, yeah, it's becoming like a little bit of a mess. They're trying to like say, no, we want Tank Davis versus Lomachenko. Lee Van said, if Shakur dog walks Tank and wins the easy decision, will people still think it's boring? No, that would be the performance of the year. In the same way, Teofimo Lopez upsetting Vasily Lomachenko late 2020 was the performance of the year. If Shakur was able to outbox and beat Tank Davis, performance of the year. He's probably fighter of the year. He's probably a top 3 pound for pound fighter in the sport. That would be huge, even if it's an uneventful type of fight. Yeah, Ventru. We went through Oshaki Foster. I probably spent more time talking Oshaki Foster versus Conceição than anything else. Terrible judging. I thought it was a robbery, but I almost want to rewatch that fight without the potentially biased commentary to see if I still arrive at Oshaki Foster winning by a few rounds. You know what I mean? I didn't even think it was a close fight. I felt really bad for Foster when that scorecard was announced, but yeah, we talked a lot about that one. QT said, you said Ryan Garcia literally said, my mom has cancer. Doctors say she could go any day. And it was weird. Like, who takes that kind of news about your mom having cancer, and then the next thing that you do is post a video on social media with you sitting on a couch and a camera is set up shooting you kind of going like this and shaking your head like you're sad, and you're posting that. Like, how inauthentic can you get in reacting to something that is so intimate and personal? You know what I mean? That's why, like, look, I'm not going to be like the old get off my porch Clint Eastwood type of like boomer talking about social media and like these kids growing up on social media. But, you know, with Ryan Garcia, I will say growing up famous, I think might have messed his head up a bit. I think that having millions of followers while he was like a mid-teenager might have messed him up a bit. But when you are indoctrinated into social media world, how do you separate reality from that? Like, look, I make tons of YouTube videos. I engage with you guys, and you guys know that when I engage with you, like in the comments and on these chats, I'm authentically like talking with you guys, right? But when I'm scrolling, if I'm scrolling through Instagram or scrolling through Twitter, I try to be aware of what I am doing rather than letting the two blend into each other to the degree that this in my hand is as real as all this. You know what I mean? And I don't know how delusional Ryan Garcia is, but when I saw that reaction to his mom reportedly having breast cancer, look, I can speak from personal experience when that's not how you're supposed to act. You know what I mean? And I get it. He's a celebrity. He's an entertainer. He has to do different things to monetize his celeb status. That just ain't that ain't it. That ain't it. You know what I mean? And if if you want to do that, I think that there are more authentic ways of capturing that. Like the Kardashians do, right? I've never watched an episode, but it's my understanding that they capture a lot of like real stuff, but in their reality show, I'm being kind of real about it. I'm reacting authentically about it kind of way. But, you know, Ryan Garcia just seems totally inauthentic, and he seems deluded. He seems a bit hateful too. He seems pretty damn hateful, I gotta say. But yeah, it'll be interesting. It'll be interesting to see who is willing to work with him, like in a non-shameful way, once he does return from that 12-month suspension. And I'm also curious to see how much he tries to clean up his reputation before the suspension's over. But yeah, we're gonna wrap this one up pretty soon, guys. I also want to make a couple of just quick fight announcements that I saw, and just kind of give like a quick, rapid fire reaction to them. Well, first of all, Boots Ennis is about to fight somebody who doesn't matter a ton, David Avanesian, who got knocked out by Terrence Crawford, but who also beat like Josh Kelly. Pretty good fighter, David Avanesian. I'm gonna do a preview on that. Janibek's about to fight Mihailovic. They need to get Janibek an opponent that matters. We talked about that earlier in the hour. Again, Murataya is going to be fighting Tevin Farmer on that Janibek undercard. Sam Goodman's going to be fighting Chanoy Warawut on Wednesday. Liam Wilson returns to the ring to fight Youssef Dib on Wednesday as well. I think it's on that same card as Sam Goodman. Chocolatito returns to the ring. He's going to be fighting Robert Barrera on the 12th. I think that is Friday on ESPN Plus, and Chocolatito is going to be at bantamweight. Sky Nicholson is going to be defending her WBC featherweight title on that Boots undercard against Diana Vargas. By the way, Kazuda Ioka lost his belt against Martinez yesterday. I wasn't expecting that, and he looked every bit of 35 years old in that ring. Ioka did. He looked very sluggish. He looked like he might want to consider retirement. This is after he beat Joshua Franco and Donnie Nietes just a couple fights ago. Ioka, people were talking about maybe him fighting Bam Rodriguez in the not too distant future, or fighting Bam, somebody of a super high caliber. All of that is dashed now. I don't think Ioka is the fighter that he was 1 year ago, really. Daniel Jacobs also lost to Shane Mosley Jr. on that Nate Diaz versus Masvidal undercard. Mosley Jr. looked pretty good. Daniel Jacobs looked almost unrecognizable. I'm like, whoa, like he just doesn't look like Daniel Jacobs. He doesn't fight like Daniel Jacobs anymore. He looks like he fought like a former fighter. I'll put it like that. So yeah, he obviously, I think he hung it up too. So I think he's done. But Keyshawn Davis also beat Madueño. Abdullah Mason, he looked fantastic on that Shakur Stevenson undercard. By the way, he is my favorite young prospect in the game right now. Abdullah Mason has been for like a few fights. Sometimes fighters come along and their hand speed jumps off the page. I look at Abdullah Mason as having those types of skills where you just watch him and you say, wow. There are a lot of really good fighters, great fighters that don't have that wow factor. I think Abdullah Mason does. He's one of the guys who I would say, hey, check this guy out. Like, if you're not even that much into boxing, but you want to see something kind of exciting, I'll be like, check out Abdullah Mason. Also, Anthony Joshua is going to be fighting Daniel Dubois for Dubois' IBF heavyweight title, apparently, September 21st. That's good. I think that's going to result in a knockout. Like, these are both super heavy hitters. Daniel Dubois seems like his confidence has just been growing by multitudes over his last couple fights against Jarrell Big Baby Miller, and then obviously against Philip Ergovich. My gosh, great performances for Daniel Dubois. Stopped them both. He's going to be fighting Anthony Joshua September 21st. Anthony Joshua is coming off of stopping Otto Wallin, knocking Francis Ngannou out cold. Before that, knocking out Robert Helenius, beating Jermaine Franklin before that, right? So he's had a few very good performances lately. I'm looking forward to this one. And of course, I think I'm going to favor Anthony Joshua. I can't wait to do a preview and dive deeper into this one. But you would think that Anthony Joshua is still the better boxer between the two, given the experience. He's now, got this, pairing that appears to be working with Ben Davison. But again, Daniel Dubois, I mean, he's just one of those physical monsters that seems to finally learn, it's like he finally woke up and discovered and learned, wait a second, I've got knockout power, I've got fast hands, I'm the beast, I'm one of the most physically gifted beasts in the division in all of boxing, and you know what I mean? And I'm just learning this about myself, it seems like Daniel Dubois is just waking up to that reality. And it's pretty exciting for fight fans to see him kind of grow, seeing his confidence match his physical attributes. You know what I mean? By the way, Virgil Ortiz Jr. is going to be fighting Sergey Bohachuk August 10th. It looks like that fight is coming together. That's going to be 1 week after the Terrence Crawford versus Madrimov fight card, which again, I think I'm going to try to get tickets to that. But Virgil Ortiz Jr. against Sergey Bohachuk. Remember, Bohachuk just beat the brakes off of Brian Mendoza, who knocked out the current champion, Fundora. So Brian Mendoza beat Fundora, knocked him out after beating Brian Mendoza knocked out Jason Rosario. Then he knocks out Sebastian Fundora. Then he loses to Tim Tszyu via decision in a pretty brutal fight. Like, it was a competitive fight, but Tim Tszyu ended up really beating up on Brian Mendoza. And Brian Mendoza then got beaten up. I thought he was going to get stopped because of how badly Sergey Bohachuk was beating up on Mendoza. Well, now Bohachuk, whose only loss, I think, is to Brandon Adams during like maybe the COVID 2020 year. Bohachuk is coming off that performance against Mendoza and is going to be fighting Virgil Ortiz Jr. This will be Virgil Ortiz Jr.'s third fight, I believe, of the year. I think it's his third fight of the year. So it's good that now he seems to have his health in check, hopefully, knock on wood, because he's been dealing with that rhabdomyolysis that's been keeping him out of the ring. It has been canceling like several of his fights. I hope that Virgil Ortiz, who's one of my favorite fighters in all of boxing right now. I love watching Virgil Ortiz. He's such a ferocious puncher, period. And I can't wait for this fight against Bohachuk. Like, I just want to see how that unfolds because I'm still not yet sure what Virgil Ortiz can do at 154. And also, Jack Catterall is going to be fighting Regis Prograis August 24th. Wouldn't that be something if Catterall ends up being the guy to knock off Josh Taylor and Regis Prograis? I know Prograis, just lost to Devin Haney before that. And I know Prograis didn't look great against Zorrilla before that. But you want to talk about fighting the opponents that matter. Jack Catterall has a chance at, again, having beaten Josh Taylor in their rematch. He really should have gotten the decision win in their first fight and become undisputed champion. The decision didn't work out his way. Beats Josh Taylor in the rematch and now has an opportunity to fight former two-time 140-pound champion Regis Prograis. Is Catterall going to be the betting favorite in this one? I would think that because of where they are in their career, seemingly that he might be. But yeah, I'm pretty interested in that fight too. But yeah, before we leave, I want to get to some of what you're saying. Yeah, QT, that suspension was a joke. Yeah, he cheated, then intentionally tried to hide it. He came in overweight. Yeah, try to like dilute the percentage of the substance in your body, perhaps by coming in overweight, and then throwing other companies like that ashwagandha under the bus. Ashwagandha, the company, came out, that supplement said, no, we don't have ostarine in our product. I'm surprised they didn't sue Ryan Garcia for throwing them under the bus like that. I'm sure that they want a whole bunch of like celebrity and pro athlete cosigns, not people wondering if their product has, ostarine and banned substances. Yeah, Boxing with Frank Bay said Ryan Garcia is a cash cow, like it or not, and he did beat Haney down. He will sell again until he's convicted like Mike Tyson. The public will still buy his fights. Yeah, well, we'll see how these next several months play out because I don't think he's out of the woods, like just mental health wise. I really do think that this is something that, kind of extends beyond his ability to perform in the ring. He's obviously a super gifted fighter. He's one of those punchers that some guys, like 90% of pro boxers, could work on their power their whole career, work on their speed their whole career. They will never hit as hard as Ryan Garcia, will never throw as fast as Ryan Garcia. Life is unfair like that. But he's got to get his life, I believe, on track. Let's see. QT said, even with the cheating, Ryan could have just stayed quiet and still made boatloads of money. Yeah, he is blowing it. Yeah, and you know what? If he was just acting kind of wild and crazy, then you could still make money. But once you start crossing the line in certain ways, brands and companies are going to stop wanting to work with you. And then you start diluting, or you start narrowing the money-making opportunities. I mean, look, Alex Jones, look at where he's at now. You know what I mean? Like, he's having to like foreclose and to sell off assets because of how his mouth has gotten him into trouble, you know, over the years. So yes, you can troll. Yes, you can keep on trolling. Yes, you could play the heel, play the villain, and still make money. But be careful, because you can cross certain lines that end up hurting your earning potential. Not to mention just making you look like a total dirtbag. Like, there is that. Lee Vance got boots in under 6.5 rounds against Avanesian. Maybe, like, look, Roman Villa, I forgot what round Boots stopped Roman Villa in, but Avanesian, he is one of these guys who likes to kind of stay low. He's going to be a lot shorter than Boots Ennis. He likes to kind of move his head and then come in and explode, right? We'll see if Boots Ennis is able to maintain range with a short guy that's a little bit trickier to hit. Like, think of Tank Davis when he fought Isaac Cruz, where Isaac Cruz was shorter, right? And kind of coming in with his head down. We'll see what the high dynamic, how that plays out in the ring. But I wonder if Boots Ennis actually has an easier time with somebody near his height like Roman Villa than he will against Avanesian. We'll see. Lee Van said Daniel Dubois is too easy to hit. It won't end well for him. Yeah, if Daniel Dubois gets tagged by as many right hands, or even half as many right hands from Anthony Joshua that he did against Philip Ergovich, lights out for Daniel Dubois. He might have to take another knee. But yeah, we're about to wrap this one up, guys. I want to thank you guys for coming in. GWK. Oh, shoot. Heck yeah. Thank you for coming in. You said Virgil versus Bohachuk. That's what we thought Fisher versus Babbage was going to be at 154. Insane fight. I actually want to rewatch that fight because I was like half asleep because I watched it after watching all of the other fights of the night. So I actually have to go back and recheck that one. But yeah, I want to thank you guys once again for coming through. Lee Van, GWK, Nothing is Original, Ryan is Poison. Yeah. I don't think he'll leave boxing for as long as boxing is willing to pay him, but we'll see. QT, thank you again. Boxing with Frank Bay, Ventru, DJ, Sub Swoles, Jacob Clementi, H Money, MOB. Yeah, thank you guys. Until next time, I'm going to try to do this again. It's been a while since the last time I did a live chat, but I want to get back up with you guys next week after this weekend's fight so we can recap some of that and then see how some of these boxing stories are going to play out. And I'm sure there's going to be more, breaking boxing news between now and then. But yeah, thank you once again. I'm Woog.